So I guess to reiterate, what are the specific plans to house the 130 people who will be displaced?
Well, as you might know, there was some disagreement on the council as to Nickelsville. So, and I think it would be good if we have all three here. You can hear different facets.
Will we take this one, maybe?
Yeah, there we go. I don't think there's a well-thought-out plan what to do with the folks who are basically going to be moved from Nickelsville. The council said they want $500,000 as emergency expenditure. I just looked at the fiscal note today. It didn't say where the money's coming from. I don't know if it's coming from social services. I'm not sure if it's going to be a part of a supplemental plan. So the short answer is I'm not sure it's really clear. The longer answer is that a certain percent of those people will be able to be relocated in some sort of housing. But we know that every single shelter is overflowing. It's uneven. Sometimes shelters will have a couple beds open, but overall, they're so crowded, people are being referred to Nickelsville. Now, Nickelsville was not safe. I'm not going to argue that. And it wasn't healthy. And it's not right that people live in tents in cold weather. That argument is all correct. However, what is better? To have someone sleeping with what? A thin blanket outside? Or at least have a floor and have a shelter and have a place they can go to where they don't have to get up or be feared that they're going to be, quite honestly, assaulted. One of the things about Nickelsville is that it was a self-managed group, and it did move to different locations. And communities that did, in fact, where they were located, my talking to people, Lake City and other places, there was not a problem of crime from Nickelsville people. I think what we need to do is look at how we can work with some people using perhaps a third party to look at managed encampments that are well organized and well controlled. I have legislation on that came out of my committee unanimously with two of the people. In fact, we signed a letter that said Nickelsville should be closed on September 1st. I don't think the letter, that, by the way, was anti-encampment. I think it was that this is a bad situation, we have to do something about it, and I agree. But it's a difficult problem. We're not going to have a solution overnight. And it's something that we're going to continue probably to debate on the council and in the public. But overall, what we have to recognize is that Nickelsville aside, there are hundreds and hundreds of people sleeping in tents around the city in wooded areas. And that's not good. We don't want those people there. We have established protocols. In fact, I would help promote them, where we give notice in advance, we take the belongings and put them in storage so they can come back, and we try to put them into basically services or housing. So we have a protocol for going around and removing isolated camps, and we should continue to do that, and we should continue to do that so this way they're not throughout the city. But we should be open to the possibility, as a tool, a temporary tool, that there be some organized effort for a structured, controlled encampment as a halfway house, so to speak. And it appears that between 50 and 80% of people in Nickelsville leave within a year. So it's not a solution. It's not even a good solution, but it's a workable one, I think, if we approach it with the proper attitude and proper support.
I have a somewhat different point of view of this. I'm very disappointed with the mayor. I think that he has not handled this well. He has no plan, and we have set a deadline. Winter is coming, and also Food Lifeline can use that site to help people who need nutrition. And so there's a very positive use that can be made of that site, and they have a deadline as well. So what we've asked is for the mayor to do what he should have done quite some time ago, and that is to develop a plan to find housing and other services for the people who live there. He's failed to do that. In my view, he's kicking the can down the road by saying let's have more encampments in other neighborhoods and in other communities. And I don't think that's going to work anymore. Now, each of us who signed the letter may have a slightly different view in terms of how we work to ensure that the people who are at what's called Nickelsville, which I think is unfairly named as well, how they can be helped before the closure of the encampment occurs. But the mayor has to come up with a plan, and he's got a short period of time. This has been going on for far too long, and it's gotten worse and worse in terms of health and safety, and the permanency of the structures that are there has grown, as you probably have seen, where the structures has continued to increase. I have spoken to him and his staff a number of times over many months, saying that you have to have an effective plan to deal with this encampment that is illegally on public property, and he hasn't done it.
The situation we're in is not ideal. I don't think any of us want people to be living in a situation like Nickelsville, and yet I think that's unfortunately the reality. It's not just Seattle. I mean, we see this in cities around the world, frankly. And while I would like to see the mayor or the city be able to have a better response, I'm really not sure what that is. Coming out of the South Lake Union exercise, we know that building a unit of affordable housing costs about $250,000. And just for the folks in Nickelsville, the 130 households, whatever in there, we're talking, $30-40 million. If we want to accommodate all 2,000 people that were counted on the one-night count in the city of Seattle, we're looking at something like $500 million. And then we know that, guess what? Next year, there are going to be new people facing challenges through health care or loss of their job, and are going to be out there experiencing homelessness again. And, it would be great to have a plan, the resources required to put everyone in the type of housing that we want to put in. It's not impossible. We're working towards that. But until we get there, I think we need to have some alternatives. The challenges at Nickelsville are multiple. But one of the challenges is around specifically the fact that it is unsanctioned, which means they are there illegally. Now, the city has done a good job or a bad job, depending on your perspective, at turning our head, but it's created a problem for sure. It means the people that are there as part of Nickelsville and have rules set up have no way to keep someone else off the property because it's not their property and they don't have permission to use it. If someone enters the property against their will and they call the police say, none of you are here legally. I either have to kick all of you out or none of you out, which is creating some of the tension that we're starting to see today. And so, what's going to happen when Nickelsville moves on? Well, Nickelsville's existence has never been one about asking permission. They will find a new spot, I suspect. We have some resources that I'm not sure, as Nick mentioned, where they're going to come from, but we'll probably find something to help some of those folks transition. But it's not like there's a bunch of affordable housing with nobody waiting in line. I mean, if those Nickelsville people get in housing, it means someone else is probably not accessing that housing right now. And so we're just playing a numbers game. And they're going to find a new place. And if the city can find it in ourselves to sanction a place, set up some legal structure and some framework and put some resources into it. And I believe the mayor has tried pretty hard in the last 2 years to get consensus on that. And the reality is, on the council, there's simply not the votes to do that yet. And maybe we do that in this section. Maybe we find a way to do it. There are some opportunities with churches to proceed, and so maybe that is an outcome that happens by 9/1. Or maybe we're back in the same situation and it just resets like it has for the last few years. I think what you'll find, though, is all of us want to help. We have different perspectives on what that looks like. And I hope that regardless of where those folks end up, that you'll find a council that's compassionate and working to find the resources we can to meet the needs of not just those individuals, but the rest of the community that suffers when folks are homeless too.
Cheryl, what we do prioritize.
We have, and because of the wealth of information, I think we've answered a couple of the next ones. So we're moving on to what are the plans to house the increasing number of homeless people after September 1st?
Before we respond, let me just remind people, if you have written questions, Brian is going around and collecting those now, and we will have an opportunity to ask those. So if you have a question as he walks by, please stick it in the basket. I'm sorry, thank you.
So we're kind of combining two questions here. What are the plans to house the increasing number of homeless people after September 1st? And also, does the city plan to clear out all other encampments, homeless camps that are not on sanctioned sites. Do you feel we've answered this one? Well, I guess the first part perhaps, but
I don't think there's a plan broader than Nickelsville.
okay. So, and this
I
might...
think it's unlikely that the city would move. You know, if we see crime rising, we'll figure out a strategic way to do something, but in general, you know.
But there's not a plan, there are evidently are other tent cities that are not on sanctioned sites?
Well, there aren't tent cities. The tent city is an entity. They have a structure, they have security, they collect food, it's an entity.
Governance.
It's a governance structure. There's no other in Seattle that I know of, unless someone else does. We have clusters of tents, or we have individual tents. And so far, we being the city, has, like I said, we set protocols, and it works on a somewhat complaint basis. We don't even know where they are. So someone calls and says, there's tents here, we're concerned, maybe there's needles, or maybe there's drinking, or there's concern about safety, then we have social workers go in first. They give out notes. They say that within 48 hours, I can't remember, 48 or 72, that will be people coming in, and that we'll ask you to move out. Please take your belongings with you. If you don't take them, we'll put them in storage, and this is the number where you can go and retrieve them. So there's a system set up. But right now, there's not a plan to do it citywide because, there may not be the resources to do it all at once.
Okay, very good. And then last question on number 5. Would the city consider using vacant buildings owned by city, county, or state to house people until there are more affordable units? Presumably those might be schools?
Or a type of campground, like a KOA campground, where people could be temporarily housed. Temporarily housed.
One of the things that was done fairly recently, there was a kind of an informal encampment around a furniture store on Western Avenue called Danny. I think there were about a dozen, perhaps 20 people who were regularly sleeping around there every night on Western Avenue. I don't know if you saw that or not. What our Human Services Department did is they located a motel in Tukwila, and they paid to house the individuals at the motel in Tukwila, and it worked because this group, similar to the Nickelsville group, wanted to stay together. They received support and some socialization from being together. And so you asked, would someplace with a roof help? And that is one of the kind of options, one of the kind of alternatives that can help. It doesn't house 100 people, 130 people, but a dozen here, a dozen there, at churches, at motels and other places like that, can make a real difference. One of the things that's done in other communities is they also work to reunite people who are homeless with their families. So sometimes that works too. The person didn't get the job they thought they would have, they're addicted, they're alcoholic, and they're ashamed to contact their family back. And the city will do that, or the Human Service Agency will do that on behalf of the city, and they will reunite them with their families. So each person is unique. You can't assume that everyone will respond in the same way. And we also know that there are some who want to live outside. They do not want to live inside. And so what I would ask of you is, what do we do in that case if we have a motel room, if we have housing available and the person says, I do not want to live inside? What would you say? What would your response be? Go ahead and live in the park or in one of the green dots? Would that be okay too? Not that we would ever get to the point, I know that we won't, where we'll have that shelter. But there are some people who refuse. Like they call us